Hello again team, it's Jess or JashiiCorrin and welcome back for another weekly plan with me. Today I'm going to be setting up for week 25 in my bullet journal, which is the 15th through to the 21st of June. But before we get into that, as per usual, we're just going to have a look at how this week was going. So as you'll remember from my last weekly plan with me, for this week I just had two long-running task lists, where I have an initial for each day of the week at the top, followed by a dot and the task. So you can see here that I have a half cross for any task that was started, and a full cross for any task that's complete. Also, just as a side note, please excuse the kind of blue tinge that my fingers and fingernails have. One of my students was, well, she had some struggles today. And so as part of that, my hands are dyed blue. Thankfully I've managed to get most of it off, but not ideal. I have really enjoyed the long-running task list for this week, so I think I'm going to use a similar element for the week coming. But flipping over, just a reminder that any of the equipment I use in today's setup is linked in the description box below. In terms of the timing for the setup that I have today, this one took about 25 minutes from first laying of the washi tape to my final touches of the pen. As always, this doesn't include the penciling in though, so add about maybe 4 or so minutes. Which brings us up to about a 30-minute spread. In terms of the questions that were left on last week's plan with me, our first one comes from Aideen Bullet Journal, who asked, what do you think about trackers all year round, at the monthly or the weekly? I personally find that monthly works best for me because it's just a nice amount of time. I don't have to draw up a tracker every week. All year trackers I can see the benefit of, it's just that I continually forget to go back and actually check in with them. I know people really enjoy things like the year in pixels spreads where you track your mood for the year, and I can understand the benefit of having something like a period tracker for a year, because tracking that on the monthly or the weekly would be a little bit silly maybe, depending on how short your cycle is of course. The weekly ones I can see the benefit of because if they're on your weekly spread, they're a lot more in your face, so you're more likely to actually check in with them and be held a bit more accountable. So my preference is monthly. I can see the merits of the other ones, but they don't work as well for me. Our next question comes from Mickey, who asked, my question for this week is if the washi tapes that you use for clean lines are not your favourites. I know you have quite a collection, but some of the ones I see you use for lines are so cute, and I personally would have a hard time not using washi for decoration. So yeah, the washi tapes that I use to do my straight lines are the ones that I'm not even sure how I came to acquire them, if I'm honest. I think it might have been that I bought one of those kind of mixed washi packs, and they're the ones that aren't really my favourites. But I have about 10 or so, maybe a few more rolls of washi tape that I know I'm not going to use for decoration in my planner because they don't really have patterns that I like as much, I guess. So rather than just throwing them out or giving them to somebody else, I use them for the straight lines. Our next question comes from Lisa Britt, who said, I'm having trouble spacing out the pages in my journal. I love monthlies and weeklies and use dailies consistently, but the special lists and habits I like to record kinda get lost in the mix. Should I divide my bujo into pre-planned sections? I do have an index, but it's a few pages long at this point. So I've toyed around with this myself in my previous journals. And what I personally like to do is I have a couple of collections at the back of my journal so that I know exactly where they are, I can flip to them really easily. But the majority of my other pages I just do on the next available blank spread. What can be helpful is marking pages in particular that you want to be able to refer back to really quickly by using something like a washi tape border or a small tab, just so they stand out when your journal's closed, which means that you can quite easily flip to them if you need to. Also, given that your index is a few pages long as you said, it might be worth looking into which pages you're actually putting in your index, and whether they all need to be there. I know that when I've used an index previously, in a journal that actually had numbered pages, at the top of my index I'd write out which pages each month fell between, so something like January goes from page 23 to page 43, then February is from page 44 to page 65 or whatever it is. And then underneath that, I'd list out any important collections and what pages they were on in particular. So it might be that in the middle of January, I had a collection that I want to refer back to, so I'd add that to that collections list. What you can also do if you want to keep your full index is highlight pages of important in the index, so if you look at your index at a glance, you can see which pages are more important than others. Hopefully that makes sense, but really it's completely up to you whether you divide your bujo into pre-planned sections. I personally don't like to because I don't like to kind of over or underestimate how much space I'm going to need for a certain section, and then either have blank pages or have to flip ahead and put it somewhere that doesn't really make sense. But using the back of your journal for collections is one possible way forward. Only indexing the pages that are important to you is another solution. And you can mark pages so they're really easy to find using things like tabs or washi tape. Our next question comes from Shanya, who said, I love the colour of your headers. What is the pen and shade? So for the blue strips that I've got on this page and the header that I had on the last one, I'm using the Tombow Dual Brush marker in the colour 569. In terms of the gold, I'm using my Clearo Fine Tip Gold watercolour paints. And then for the black, it's just my Pitt Artist pens. Our next question comes from Anita, who asked, how many frosts have you had in Wellington? We've had 2 to 3 hard frosts here in Hamilton. Honestly, Wellington doesn't really get a lot of frost, which is kind of a bummer because I think frost is awesome. Well, maybe not so much for sustaining plant life, but yeah. The issue in Wellington is that if it's cold enough to get a frost, it's cold enough to piss with rain. So a lot of the time we don't get frost, we just get puddles. I think roughly on average the number of days of frost we get in June is like 2 days. So considering it's only the 11th, we've still got some time. We might get some frost. But honestly, I can't even remember the last time I saw frost. Our next question comes from Kim, who asked, what are those symbols behind people's names? I assume you're talking about the little symbols that pop up next to people's name when I put their comment on the screen? That's a big assumption though, so let me know if that's not what you meant. But these little icons are just things that YouTube puts in for me, but we have a little purple speech bubble with a heart in it for a top commenter, and the little red circle with the YouTube icon on it, that just tells me how long people who have their subscribers public have been subscribed to me. Our next question comes from Stella, who asked, my question is, what inspired you to get into bullet journaling? And also, would you consider doing a food type theme? So last question first. Yes, I would consider doing a food type theme. I've seen some really cute sushi layouts and I'm mighty tempted. And in terms of what inspired me to get into bullet journaling, so this was about 3.5 years ago. I was frazzled out of my mind, could not keep track of anything that I needed to do. And it was around that time that I actually started seeing all of the hashtag bullet journal posts over on Tumblr. I personally was intrigued and leapt in headfirst, so I bought an LT 1917, I bought my mild liner pens, and I guess they'd say the rest is history. The system just really clicked with me, and it was a good way for me to be creative, but also organised. One of the biggest inspirations that I probably had when I got started was Boho Berry, because she was one of the bigger names in the bullet journal community. Since then we of course have a couple of other people who are now quite big names in our community, but she was the one that I found first and that kind of got me hooked. Our next question comes from Francesca Mia, who asked, I'm wondering if you'd ever do a theme after your favourite artist, whether modern or classical. I don't really know if I have a favourite artist. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to doing it, but it really just depends on the complexity of their art form. I know I've seen things like Van Gogh paintings that people have done as part of their layouts. It just looks like a lot of work. Again, I'm not opposed to the idea, but I don't even know if I have a favourite artist. What an unsatisfying answer. As always, thank you to our inquirers from last week. If you guys have a question you'd like me to answer on next week's video, please do drop that in the comments. Alrighty, so as you can see we have a section for my events for each day of the week and then 2 spaces for long-running task lists. A bit of a simpler decoration this week, just because I'm busy, but I still think it looks pretty good. Thank you for watching, team. If you liked today's video, please do make sure to give it a big thumbs up, and if you wanted to see more from me, feel free to go check out one of my other videos. Until next time, bye!